Welcome back to another Swampfox Optics video, and in this video we are going to be going over what our BRC reticle is, or our Bullet Rise Compensating reticle that can be found in our Raider 1X Micro Prism. We released our Raider Micro Prism last year, and one of the reticles that we threw in this optic was our BRC, and this was previously found in our blades, or our full-size 1X Prism. And this reticle is something we're really proud of. It works really well if you know how to use it. But the reality is it can be a little bit confusing if you've never used a BRC reticle as opposed to a BDC reticle, which we will go over. So we're gonna talk about how to implement this. And most importantly, we're gonna talk about if it works on your gun, because a BRC or a BDC reticle are typically built off of a particular platform with a particular barrel length and a particular muzzle velocity and a particular round. And so we've seen some confusion when it comes to the question being asked of, okay, I get the BRC reticle, but will it work on my fill in the blank rifle? So we're gonna answer that today, and let's get into it. BRC, I've said it already. I ran out of room, but we're going with it. Bullet Rise Compensating reticle. So I'm gonna do a quick little diagram of what that looks like if you don't have a Raider right in front of you. There you go. This is our Bullet Rise Compensating reticle. And before we go kind of any further, the most important thing that we need to understand, like we've talked about in previous videos, is how do bullets work, right? When we fire a round out of a rifle, it is not traveling in a perfectly straight line. What's happening on a very minute scale, at least one we can't really perceive with our eyes, is we are actually angling our rifle muzzle up just a little bit so that when we fire the round, it has an upwards trajectory. It's gonna reach an apex point, and then it's gonna continue to fall down as gravity pulls it down back to earth. What the Bullet Rise Compensating reticle does is accounts for the space between the shooter and their first point of intersection between their point of aim and point of impact. And now let's get into what that means. So I'm gonna do a little thing here. Look at that, that's your beautiful little AR-15. We need a little injection port and a trigger. Okay, so this is our rifle. And what's happening when we shoot the gun and when our bullet rises and falls is we have our point of aim, right? And our point of aim theoretically exists in a perfectly straight line from the gun as far as our optic can see, right? And when we fire a bullet, it's gonna come up and it's gonna come back down. Let's make that line a little bit longer. Okay, sorry, they're not perfectly straight. Such is life. This is our intersection point number 1, and this is our intersection point number 2. And a lot of times, this is gonna be what's referred to as like the 50 200 yard zero or a 36 300 yard zero. It's not to scale here, but whatever application you wanna put in your brain, you know, do it. But we're gonna stick with the 50 yard and the 200 yard here, because that is what the Raider is kind of intended to be used with. So first point of intersection is our 50 yard point of aim, and that 200 yards when that bullet comes back down and re-intersects with our point of aim, that's gonna be a 200 yard zero. So what we are looking at here is we have kind of 3 phases of flight. Okay, so we have the first one, the second one, and the third one. So what we're gonna look at next is essentially how you need to manipulate the point of aim in your rifle to account for an accurate hit in each of these zones. So we know that past our second intersection, we have the bullet falling. And so this is what's commonly referred to as the BDC, the bullet drop compensation. And so when you are accounting for bullet drop, you want to raise your point of aim above your target, right? We are going to aim over our target in this section. And then this is what's going to be referred to as our BDC, bullet drop compensating, okay? And then in this intersection, right, our bullet's actually traveling above our point of aim. And so in order to make an accurate hit, if you want to be really, really precise, we actually need to aim under our target, in between our point of aim, or our first and second intersection of our point of aim and point of impact. So here, we're gonna aim under. This doesn't really have a name, but there you go. And then, if you notice the shape of these two parts, they're just inverse of each other. And so anywhere inside of our first point of aim, point of impact intersection, or our first zero, we are also gonna have to aim over our target to make an accurate hit. And that was where the BRC comes into play, the Bullet Rise Compensating Reticle. The next important piece of information here is understanding, so as the bullet gets farther away from us and drops farther, we need to aim higher and higher over our target. That is also going to be the same inverse for Bullet Rise Compensating. The farther we are away from our first point of aim, the higher we will have to hold, right? So with this diagram here, we can begin to see essentially how our bullet trajectory is going to impact whether we use a BRC or a BDC reticle. And so today we're going to talk about the Raider, and the Raider is going to be focused on this first portion, everything inside of our 50-yard zero. What we need to understand as we go over kind of what happens before we hit our 50-yard zero is height over bore. I know that's something that us optic companies throw around all the time, and it might be something that you understand, but if you don't understand, I'm gonna try and make it as clear as possible what we're talking about when we mean height over bore. So I'm gonna take this, okay, it's clear, and what I'm gonna do here, I want to put a hole in my whiteboard, okay? If I am standing this close to it, and I put my muzzle directly up against my whiteboard, I'm gonna do it up here, okay? I'm gonna mark, I know you can't see it because I'm doing it behind. I'm gonna mark where my muzzle's touching the whiteboard, okay? And then I'm gonna look through here, and I'm gonna try and mark what my optic is looking at, okay? All right, so set that down. Not actually gonna shoot the whiteboard, but this is height over bore, okay? This is the physical distance measured of the center line of my optic, or where my optic is pointed or looking, and the bore of my rifle, or the barrel itself, okay? So, yoop. Okay, that looks like a U, but it's a V, I promise. So this is height over bore, okay? So when I am at 0 yards from my target, that is the distance between where my bullet is gonna go and what my optic sees. What the BRC reticle does is it accounts for the height of the optic center line and over the bore when we are taking shots inside of our 50-yard zero. So now if you can imagine, right, if I take a few steps back, right, this is gonna shrink a little bit. If I take a few steps further back, it's gonna shrink even more. And if I am at 50 yards where this rifle is zeroed, okay, I'm going to have a perfect point of aim, point of impact intersection. And so this is gonna shrink all the way down to once we are at 50 yards, they're gonna be the exact same point, and that's how we zero our rifle. And so what's gonna happen as we get farther away is we don't have to aim as much over our target to make sure we hit what we wanna hit, right? So, let's do another little graph here. Okay, so this is my optic. Don't judge me, or do, don't really care. So this is our optic, this is our muzzle, and what I'm gonna draw is kind of what I just exampled, okay? So aim, impact. So this is 50 yards, again, not to scale. I apologize, you get over it. Okay, so this distance right here at the point closest to our muzzle is gonna be our height over bore. And then as we get closer to our point of impact, right, point of aim, point of impact intersection, sorry, the distance between these two things is gonna shrink. And now, the last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna draw, again, our reticle. And the holds inside the reticle are going to help account for the distance between you and your target inside of your zero distance, whether the target's at 10 yards, 15 yards, and so on, okay? So this right here is our reticle, except it doesn't have the circle on it. And for ease of understanding and space on the whiteboard, I'm not gonna draw the circle this time. But this will give you an idea of what our reticle looks like. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give us, I'm thinking. YouTube, I'm thinking. Okay. I'm gonna redraw my gun over here, so I have a little bit more space. All right, Tommy, we still good? You see that? Awesome. Okay, so I just redrew this and shifted over. Same exact thing, okay? Not to scale, don't get mad at me. Here is our reticle, and now I'm gonna explain each one of these points and what they mean. So this tip of our arrow is gonna be our 50, 200 yard zeros. It's gonna be the point of aim, point of impact hit at 50 yards, and then around 200 yards as the bullet re-intersects our point of aim. Okay, so this bottom point vertical line is going to be our 15-yard hold. Okay, this first dot going to be our 10-yard hold. Okay, and then this very bottom dot is going to be our 5-yard hold. This is what the reticle essentially is entailing, and this is how we are accounting for the height over bore at a given distance inside of our 50-yard zero. So the next little part, we are going to jump over to the range and show this practically applied. So instead of just talking on a whiteboard, we're going to see how exactly this works on the range with a couple different kinds of rifles. All right, now that we have established kind of functionally how the BRC reticle works, we'll test it practically with the rifle and the ammunition that it was designed to work for. So this is a 16-inch rifle, it's an LWRC, and then I have a suppressor on here because we like our hearing and it's not gonna make enough of a difference to matter in this test, right? The velocity will be negligible at best. So 16-inch rifle, shooting 55 grain target ammo you buy at the shelf just about anywhere. So we will do essentially 3 shots on this target. So we're gonna aim the whole time for this A zone here. So we'll do 5 yards away. We'll use the very bottom dot in our BRC reticle to aim at that. We'll take 5 more steps to 10 yards. We'll use our second dot to aim at this particular spot, and then we'll take 5 more steps back and use the 15-yard hold. And theoretically, we should have all of our rounds inside this A zone at the very least, and at the very best, they're all gonna have the same elevation because the BRC reticle is accounting for the distance that we are away from our target. So let's do that and see what happens. Okay. 5 yards. Okay. So using the very bottom dot, aiming at my A zone here. Okay. 5 more steps. 5, okay. Second dot, make sure I don't hit the steel behind that. Okay. 5 more yards. Okay. And the bottom of our arrow. All right, let's go look at the target. All right, so exactly what we wanted to happen happened, right? We have all of our shots within our A zone here. The reality is that this is probably more easily attributable to me as a shooter, right? Breathing, holding a gun, whatever, than it is a difference in our height over bore and the distance we're shooting our round at. So this is actually exactly what we want to see. This is exactly what we want to see out of the BRC reticle because it's going to allow us at those 5, 10, 15-yard given distances to still place accurate shots where we want them to go. What you're probably asking right now is, well, but what if my gun isn't that gun, right? If it's not 16 inches, you're shooting a different round, or you're shooting a 300 Blackout or something, right? My gun's not that gun. Will the BRC work for my gun like it works for that gun you just shot? So for this next part of the test, we have a 300 Blackout, 10.5 inch, shooting subsonic ammo, and the Raider is sitting on top of a Unity 2.26 mount. So we've got a skyscraper mount, we have a completely different rifle, a completely different bullet, moving at a completely different speed. So obviously this is a pretty extreme difference, but that's the point. We want to show you that this also works on kind of the exact opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to small frame ARs. So we're going to try the exact same test, exact same distances, at least as close as I can get walking, and hopefully see the same results. So let's get to it. All right, let's go look at it. All right, we're gonna try to ignore that I can't shoot for shit apparently, but if we take the average of our group, we're still inside of that elevation we want to be. So this does in fact work on a different caliber with a different speed coming out of the barrel on a much shorter barrel. So we can confirm that with what we want to do, is shooting 15 yards and in, the BRC Reticle will give us holds in order to make accurate shots at the targets we want to hit. I still suck though. As you guys just saw on the range, right, this applies to a pretty wide variety of rifle types, ammunition types, and heights of your mount. And the reason for that is because the distance between you and your target at 5, 10, and 15 yards and the height of a bore and the type of bullet you're shooting is so minuscule at the end of the day that effectively this will be applicable for you and whatever application that you might use. And like I said at the beginning of the video, we get asked this question all the time. So how do I know if the BRC Reticle is going to work with my rifle? And while I can pretty confidently say that this will work for a very wide variety, the one thing I want to make sure we're clear about too is that you should test this yourself. Don't take what I'm saying for gospel and go just assume it's going to work, right? Go do the test that I just did. Obviously it's not that hard. Set up a target, walk 5 paces back, 10 paces back, 15 paces back, and try it yourself. That ultimately will be the best data that you can possibly get because it's going to be you shooting, it's going to be your gun, it's going to be your ammo, your optic, your conditions, and that's going to give you the most actionable information that you can possibly get. But hopefully from that live range portion, you're able to see that this does work and it can work on a wide variety of rifle types, ammunition types, et cetera, et cetera. The last little touch point I have for you guys is this information, this BRC Reticle, it does not really work on the flip side, right? So you can't quite take this data and apply it on the other side where you can say, okay, so my 5,200 yard zero here, so my first hash is gonna be 300 yards instead of 15 yards. The second one might be 400 and the last one might be 500, right? It doesn't quite work that way, but as a fun test, you can also test that yourself. You could take these holds and figure out what they're gonna do at each distance, but the reality is this is a 1x Prism optic. You're probably not gonna be shooting 500 yards with the 1x Prism optic and holding with this dot at 500 or 600 yards. So it doesn't quite work on the inverse. This reticle is designed to work between our zero yards and 50 yards and account for the distance that you are away from your target inside of your given zero distance. All right, guys, I hope this video helps you understand our BRC Reticle a little bit more that you can find in our Raider. I hope this helps you figure out if you can apply this to your gun or not, and ultimately just how it works and if it's gonna be a good fit for you. If you're looking at purchasing a Raider, you can look at our website, swampfoxoptics.com. You can also find a huge other selection of optics for any of the naked guns in your safe. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you don't mind, go ahead and like and do all the YouTube things. It tells YouTube that you like us and it tells us that you like us. So thank you very much, and we will see you in the next video.